Okay. Hope everyone's doing well. All right. So Genesis. Yes, there has been a gazillion books written on Genesis, whether they be commentaries or whether they're books with other, scholars talking to each other about how to read Genesis, debates over Genesis, all kinds of things. So these are some of the books that I've read over the years. I still have them. Obviously have them. Of course, I still have them. I didn't throw them away. So there's more than enough out there if you want to read more. I don't want to act like we're going to cover everything tonight because we won't, as usual. Possibly enough time. You can get this book on the far corner here, Genesis, History, Fiction, or Fact, or neither. You can get that book. That book's kind of recent. It came out, I think, about 3 or 4 years ago. The Lost World of Genesis, one by John Walton. Kind of an interesting book. I don't know if I agree with everything about it, but you can get that. Hugh Ross's book, Navigating Genesis. He's an astrophysicist. I don't really consider him really like a biblical scholar or anything, but he's still got some insights there. So you might want to get that. Reading Genesis Well, John Collins. I don't know if I agree with that. I agree with everything I read in these books. It's just, it's the way it goes when you read biblical studies. Everybody's got some things you agree with, other things you're kind of like, I'm not sure. So, but anyway, these are some books if you want to go further on the topic. There's so many other books besides these I've mentioned. So anyway, okay. So, also, this is a really good resource. If you can get the Dictionary of Christianity and Science, there's a lot of essays in there on topics that come out in Genesis, and they give all sides of the arguments, someone that might have a different view than the other person, but there's some good articles in there you might want to get to. That's an excellent resource. Has all kinds of topics in it, just endless. So that's a good resource as well. So you'll get the PDF and you can look these up when I send them to you. So unless some of you are buying them right now on Kindle as I speak. Okay, well, there's no doubt that Genesis, there's a lot of worldview questions related to Genesis. Remember, worldview is, how we view reality. There's more than enough, so many questions that come out of Genesis, obviously. Obviously worldview questions like, is there a God? Who is God? Does he care about what's going on in this world? Is he engaged in this world? Where did everything come from? Is there questions like, who made the universe? Is there meaning in the universe? Who are we as humans? Where did evil come from? What's wrong with the world? If you look around the world, I think we probably know that, it's obviously evidence that there's something wrong with humans. As much as we can do some really good things, there's some things we can do that are pretty horrid too. Obviously there's something wrong. People want to engage in the world and try to fix things in the world. Well, what's wrong with the world? Why is it the way it is? What can we do to fix it? What we can do to try to change it? So all these worldview questions are related to Genesis, no doubt. No, it's true. You don't need the book of Genesis to know God exists. As I said before, to know there's a creator, you don't need the book of Genesis. But if you want to know what God's plans are for humanity, then yes, you would need to open the book of Genesis, because, just staring out at the stars and the universe saying it has order to it isn't going to tell you what kind of purpose it has for us as humans. So that's why you need to obviously start with the book of Genesis. Give me 1 second here. All right, just make sure everybody's muted here. Everybody's here. Okay, let's go back to that. Just want to make sure. So anyway, got to fix this again. See what happens when I get out of it. Okay, now there's obviously a pretty sharp difference, when you have two different worldviews like this, where, you've got someone like Richard Dawkins, who is a staunch atheist and biologist, says this is what our purpose is. When he says we are machines built by DNA whose purpose is to make more copies of the same DNA. This is exactly what we're here for. We're machines for propagating DNA. The propagation of DNA is a self-sustaining process. It's every living object's sole reason for living. So that's quite a contrast to the Genesis mandate, or the creation mandate in Genesis 1:26 to 28, when God talks about making us in his image, we're made in the image of God versus just being DNA in motion, right? So that's a pretty staunch contrast, but that's kind of like the two views people have of reality. I mean, you're either, you believe you're created or you don't think you're created. You think that nature made you on its own without any help, and you're just got here through chance and time, or else God created you and, you know, you're created in his image. So just remember, there's always two worldviews here that are going on in the world around us. Talk about this a little more. So the first thing I do, you know, when someone asked me over the years, am I a creationist? I had a guy ask me this once on Ohio State University. He said, don't tell me you're a creationist. Are you a creationist? And I kind of responded with like, well, as compared to what? Like, am I a naturalist? Am I a materialist? In other words, you know, I said, is this what you're asking me? I mean, are you actually asking, like, it's asking me if it's just so stupid to not believe in this scenario? It's just like the dumbest, someone just absolutely not mentally competent unless they believe in this scenario. You know, do I believe in this view of humanity? You know, do I believe the universe was produced by a mindless, non-conscious, non-moral process? Or do I believe the humans were produced by an undirected, valueless process? Or do I believe life somehow emerged from non-living matter? Or I believe that we're just one of many universes. It just turned out that ours turned out okay, and we got to get the universe set up for life, and just by a chance accident, we all happen to be here. So no, I do not believe that. I don't believe that that's what the rational explanation is. So yeah, I'm a creationist. I believe that God, that is not the answer, that nature by itself is all that exists, and nature just did all that. So, and I think that it takes more faith to believe this, to be honest, this scenario right here. So that's how I kind of respond sometimes. I ask them what they mean by that. And I ask them, what's the alternative? Is it this? Because that isn't going to work. You know, do I believe, like I said, just to reiterate it, you know, like this author says here, that man is alone in the universe. You know, he just emerged by chance, and chance is the source of every innovation. You know, pure chance, absolutely free but blind. You know, is that how we got here? No, I don't believe that. I don't think there's good evidence for that. So that's something I always have to respond back to when someone asks me, you know, am I a creationist versus am I an accident of nature? They don't like that word accident. You say accident, you'll see how they respond. Well, I'm not saying, I don't know if I say we're an accident. I mean, you know, well, that's what you're saying. There's no direction to it. There's no director behind it. It just happened, right? There's no, it's undirected natural processes. So anyway, so, you know, someone who is what we call a naturalist, which pretty much dominates most of academia, by the way. Just the punt, it's the default worldview position. You know, someone who, it's like it says here, a person who does not affirm the supernatural, right? God or gods, anything that's immaterial, souls, spirits, you know, they might say, I don't believe in ghosts, you know, because they think God's like the same thing as a ghost. Anything that's non-material, you know, they believe nature is all there is. So that's kind of a very brief definition of a naturalistic or a materialistic view of reality, or else the material world is all there is, right? Everything's just physical. There's nothing outside the physical world. So that's just kind of a short definition. And a lot of times when someone only believes that nature is all there is, there's no creator, they don't believe in any other kinds of causes out there, because, you know, they may know that, you know, sand dunes and waterfalls and clouds and things like that are, you know, sometimes, you know, natural causes. There are natural causes out there. Obviously, if I go look at, I'll show you in a second, if I go look at certain things, you know, obviously I know that nature put that together. I mean, nature was able to do that. But obviously there's some things I know that always is an intelligent cause behind that. There's always a mind behind it, no matter any time, any place I go to. Obviously, I know there's always an intelligent cause behind something like Mount Rushmore or power plants or sandcastles or things like that. So if I'm walking down the beach, and obviously, as you know, you see something like this amazing sandcastle, you're not going to say, well, I guess the wind and the erosion came together all at the right time, and it just somehow formed a picture of the Messiah and wrote the letters, thank you, Jesus. It just happened to do that. You know, it just is able to arrange itself and do that. Obviously, no matter where we go, what time of history, time of day, whatever year it is, it's always going to be an intelligent cause behind that sandcastle with Jesus in it. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. So there's always two kinds of causes we see in reality, no doubt. that we make inferences. We walk by and you say, hey, whoever made that sandcastle is an intelligent person. That took some skill, right? An intelligent mind did that. But there's some things, you're out in the middle of a sand dune and you're like, just appreciate nature. It didn't take a mind necessarily to, make that sand dune right there. Now, I believe God's behind the natural world too, but you can see the difference of what I'm saying. So just remember that a lot of times some people only allow, it comes to things like the universe and the earth and first life or DNA code, they may only allow a natural cause. And so, whereas we say an intelligent mind is behind those things, they'll say, well, no, it's just an undirected natural process, came up with the universe on its own, it set it up for life on its own, it planned ahead for Earth to be a certain way and created life from non-life and created our entire genetic code. The natural laws can do that on their own. I mean, I find that to be absolutely insanity, but some people do believe that or run into them. They think chance is a pretty good explanation. And despite the fact that they see intelligent causes all around them, because of the moral implications, if there is a God behind those things, a lot of times they always punt to a natural explanation. And now science is a study of only natural causes anyway, so science isn't going to allow any kinds of intelligent causes. So they can't just say, well, science is the best explanation when science only studies natural causes. So science isn't necessarily set up to allow the supernatural or any kinds of intelligent causes as at this point, as it always is being debated. It used to be different, but it's shifted at a certain point in history. There's no doubt that I'll mention a few things about evolution that, as Michael Denton said in his second edition or his newest edition of Evolution, he's still a theory in crisis. The guy's not even a Christian, by the way. He's a deist. He believes certainly God is behind the natural world, behind the universe, and he doesn't think that nature can do it all on its own. But he definitely agreed in this book. He said that, when you switch to viewing the mankind as a result of chance, there's no God behind it at all. It's obviously incompatible with the biblical view, right? That, we're the result of an intelligent creative activity. So there's some real conflict there. When that theory got more and more popular, as it still is today. You can get that book if you want, obviously. No, you can't. You're not allowed. Yes, you can. Remember that, though, just a few things about evolution that, when people talk to me, sometimes they say, do I believe in evolution? There's different ways to define evolution. I mean, you go to a college campus or you take a school in biology, as maybe some of you have or I have, you generally learn biological evolution, right? When you're just studying, you study evolution to the point when it got to, after we got here, after the universe was put together and life came together, we just jumped to kind of the biological evolution, right? But remember, you've got to have as I say, number 2 here, they also generally smuggle in at some point chemical evolution. They don't know how life can come from non-life, but they still try to say that, we've tried to do it and figured it out. Some people, if they're honest, they know that the data shows we still don't know how life can come from non-life. It's becoming more and more complex as the years go by, trying to figure that out. So before you get to biological evolution, you've got to have chemical evolution. Before you get to chemical evolution, you've got to have cosmic evolution, meaning that you've got to have the right universe set up for everything. So they kind of put this whole package together, and then evolution kind of explains everything if you're just a staunch atheist or materialist, right? And so, but a lot of times you'll study only biological evolution, and these other things are going to have to come into the mix at some point. That's why before, I always tell people when they start asking about evolution, I always tell them that you need these 3 things in place before you would even get to biological evolution. You'd have to have the right universe. You'd have to have a life-permitting universe where the universe allows for life to get going on Earth. And then you'd have to have the planet Earth set up a certain way with the right conditions to even get life going. And you've got to show how, living organisms come from lifeless matter, as they say in the Darwinian or in the evolutionary model, that lifeless matter made life. It doesn't make any sense. So these 3 things have to be explained before you even get to biological evolution. Okay. So that kind of is where I always push people back, that they need to answer 1, 2, 3 before you even jump to number 4. Now, and obviously, when someone asks you about evolution, you always want to ask what they mean, as I said, but also you can define it. Some different definitions as well right here. If evolution is change over time, as number 1 says, any sequent events in nature. Sure, we agree with that. That happens. No problem with that. Number 2 is compatible. No problem with that. There's no qualms about that. Number 3 is partially true, meaning that we believe that, Christian could say that natural selection, random mutations take place. Obviously, that's not that hard to, understand or say that happens. But to say it was without any guidance or design is a problem. To say that natural selection, random mutations can account for the diversity or design of life without any designer is ridiculous. And then, of course, the universal common descent, the idea that we all came from a single common ancestor, is still debated quite a bit as well, even though some people say it's set in stone, but there's some issues there that can be debated as well. So just make sure they define what they mean when they ask you about that. There isn't one definition just to say, do you believe in evolution or creation? That's a silly, kind of a silly thing to ask. As I respond, what do you mean by evolution? I say it so many times I've lost track. And this is certainly a view of evolution we would reject. At least I reject. We don't hold to what's called the blind watchmaker thesis, where all organisms descended from this common ancestor through unguided, unintelligent, purposeless material processes, such as natural selecting, acting on random mutation or mutations, variations or mutations, and it's just there's no God behind it. It's simply blind. It's undirected, unguided, non-purposeful. I mean, if that's what someone believes, I think it's going to take a lot of steps to believe that, but that's what they teach a lot of times on college campuses, and that's what some people believe. That's what Richard Dawkins believes. He wrote a book called The Blind Watchmaker. He also wrote a book called Climbing Mount Improbable, showing that he obviously knows how improbable it is that life could get going on its own, and so that's why he calls it Climbing Mount Improbable. Anyway, so then we have I don't have time to go over each one of these. You can look it up on this link I have in the bottom corner here. It was in this book, More Than Myth. But you can look them all up online. Casey Luskin, who wrote these, I'll have him actually on a call eventually. I'm emailing him right now. We're going back and forth. He's a friend of mine. He has but the website's right there if you want to look these up and go over them one by one in detail. But those are some of the problems, chemical and biological evolution. You can study these in great detail if you want to. No viable mechanism to generate a primordial soup, unguided chemical processes, trying to explain how the genetic code got here. That's a problem. Genetic information, the list goes on. Like I said, I don't have time to go over all these, but you can look that up. Just I'll send out the PDF, or you can write that down or whatever. I don't care. But the point is you can study these in greater detail. So, okay, now let's talk about what we mean by creationists. So there's no doubt today if sometimes someone says, well, are you a creationist? They kind of associate it with, Ken Ham or Answers in Genesis. I had zero exposure to this ministry when I was a new believer. I had no discipleship in any kind of creation model, wasn't taught any creation model, didn't read any books on creation models. My first exposure to Answers in Genesis was when I got sent to a conference down near Kentucky about 13 years ago. I don't know, it's been so long, maybe longer. But all their literature was there, and I didn't even know anything about it. So I had to start reading it because I didn't even know what they were saying. Apparently, they've been around long before that. So that was some of my education there of what they're saying. But there's obviously a lot of other creation models out there. If you want to get this book right here, it's really good by this guy here. He lists them all out, their different beliefs and what they agree on and don't agree on, mapping the debate here, right here. You can get that. 6 models, the beginning of everything. So that's an excellent book. So just check it out. I think that's one of the best books out there if you want to see the different views on the different creation models. Very helpful because there's so many different kind of creation models. As I said, you've got flat earthers is a joke, by the way. So some of your flat earthers on here, I hope you don't get offended, but I don't accept that as a creation model. You've got old earth creationism, you've got progressive creation, day age creation. Then of course you've got you've got intelligent design, which isn't even really using the Bible to explain their views. It's just talking about the design of design arguments. Then of course you've got some Christians that are now theistic evolutionists. They believe God used evolution as the mechanism, God's the agent behind evolution, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then, of course, you've got strict atheistic evolution, but there's some other creation models out there. Obviously, you can study them. There's a lot of them. The old Earth creationists have written a lot of their own books. Hugh Ross and Reasons to Believe. They're an old Earth creation model ministry. You can study what they believe, why they believe it. They've defended it. It's all across their website, just like Answers in Genesis has as well. They've written books with each other. This is an excellent book right here that has kind of a layout of some of the different views, and they kind of critique each other. You had Ken Ham and Hugh Ross. Ken Ham's the Earth creationist. Hugh Ross is the old Earth creationist. And you had Deborah Hermosma. She's from the evolutionary creation views. She thinks God used evolution. Then you've got Stephen Meyer, who's an intelligent design advocate. So they all kind of laid out their essays, what they believed, and kind of critiqued each other. That's a good way to see what they're saying about each other in a very generally respectful way, because they all have their arguments. And then also, and there's no doubt that Christians have spent hours and hours and a lot of spilled ink on the age of the earth. I know that. I haven't really been part of that. But if you want to get this book, it really talks about why there doesn't need to be any division over it and why we shouldn't be making it into a gospel issue. But for some reason, some Christians still do. So you can get that and read that and study that front to cover or back and forth, front to back on, some tips, how we can approach that topic. For some people, this is the most important topic to them. And I'm just not in that club. I'm sorry. But so you can, read that. That's a good discussion on that issue. Now, I mentioned that some Christians have began to embrace theistic evolution in some quarters, believing that God is the agent behind evolution. He just used evolution as the mechanism to bring life together, to create biological change, to, some of the things that counts for in the, fossil record or the whatever it is. The point is that they think God is using that process. It doesn't mean it's blind or undirected. They just think God is the one behind it. Now, of course, there's been critiques of that. There's been some challenges that have come up, and that middle book, Theistic Evolution, the second one, is a really good critique of it, because obviously there's some scientific problems, there's some theological problems, there's some scriptural problems and philosophical problems with that. That's the best book I've seen on it. So just make sure you're informed about that. But it is out there. There's some theologians that believe in it. There's some people embracing it. And part of the reason is that they got tired of the Christian that goes off to college, or person goes off and has this major faith crisis where they have to pick creation or evolution. It's always one or the other. They don't know what to pick, and they always have this, they call a false dilemma, either or. And so they're saying that they can actually be harmonized in some way, and you don't have to go through this faith crisis where you're going to walk away from Christianity because of evolution. Now, I agree that debate has led some people out of the faith, because they have been brought to the point where they have to make a decision. It seems like a crisis to them. I think we can provide better tools for them to work through it, and not, some of the things we've done in the past are mistaken. I think we've made some mistakes, but I'm not saying we need to embrace theistic evolution. Please hear me clearly. But I'm just saying that we need to have a better apologetic for that and helping people work through those issues, because it will happen. It'll happen in college, it'll happen somewhere. And if they go up to their parents or their pastor and they just tell them, it's either creation, evolution, or evolution without defining their terms correctly, then it's going to lead to a mess. So I've seen it happen over and over, trust me. Let's talk a little about Genesis. So believe it or not, the purpose of Genesis is not necessarily only to read chapters 1 through 11 or 1 to 3 and debate whether the earth is young or old or something like that. Don't forget to read Genesis 12 to 50, right? Because there's chapters after Genesis 11. Starts with Abraham in Genesis 12. We see the formation of Israel, right? And so make sure that we understand that those other chapters matter, right? I know you're saying, of course they do. But it seems like a lot of Christians are spending all their energy on chapters 1 to 11 or 1 to 3 or whatever, and debating creation models all the time or something like that. So just remember to read the rest of Genesis. There's no doubt that, as I said in the creation mandate, in Genesis 1, that God, talks about us being created in his image and likeness. Those words are kind of synonymous with each other, image and likeness. They, they talk about us resembling God, but they don't really specify the exact nature of the resemblance. You probably know, you've read that. It doesn't say, let us make man in our image, and then here's what that means: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Obviously, some people think it's just about it's an issue of mankind having dominion. They have a role to play, like a function to rule over the earth, not rule over people, but to rule. There's a ruling aspect. That's one way people have taken that to read that, what that's about. And then, sometimes, of course, we can look at it like, as it's referring to male and female. Of course, it doesn't refer anything about physical shape or outer appearance, because if we're made in the image of God, we know that, God doesn't have a body. At least the Father doesn't have a body, as far as we've ever seen Scripture. The Son does, God the Son. But you could say, number 2 here, that we definitely share. Another view is that we share in the nature of God. We aren't the nature. I mean, God is God, but we're different, but we still have some things that resemble him. We have some things that resemble, that create in his image, such as, we're intelligent, we have rationality, we have knowledge, we have creativity. God creates. He's very creative. We're creative. Humans can create some amazing things. I can't create much, not much of an artist. My daughter is, other people are. I sometimes, in all of that, I look around and go, wow, that's pretty creative. Wow. Wisdom, we have love, obviously, we have a moral quality to us. God's a moral being. We can imitate him in our moral character, if we, obviously, with God's help. God's holy. We're called to be holy. He's just. We're called to be, exercise justice, compassion. These are qualities that we obviously resemble God in. We reflect God in his image when we see these things in humans. We can do some of the most incredible things, right? We can help humans. We can, go out of our way and do amazing things. Of course, then the fall, as we talk about the fall in a little bit, then we obviously don't resemble God when we fall short of that in our sin. So I wouldn't say we want to be dogmatic what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God. I think, like I said, there's a ruling aspect where we're called to have dominion over mankind, called to be stewards of the earth. But also this number 2 here probably plays a role too, as far as how we imitate God in our just character attributes and some of the things we see in humans. So Genesis 1 to 11 is written, but remember, when it's Moses, I believe, is the author of Genesis, by the way. That's Mosaic authorship. Of course, some people like to debate that too, but the point is that he's writing Genesis to the Jewish people are coming out of Egypt, the next generation, okay? And they need to know who the one true God is. Of course, they know that there's other gods around them, right? And of course, Moses is talking about, this is the one true God. He has no competition or interference from other gods. In the midst of all these polytheistic deities, he is the one true God. Israel's God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is not the tribal God, but the Lord of heaven and earth. So Moses is addressing this fact that there is one God, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. It says that in Deuteronomy 2, right? And if you read chapter 1, the main, the key player is God. Obviously, if you look at it says over and over, in the beginning God, the Spirit God was hovering the waters, and God said, and God said. So God's mentioned over and over, some 32 times in chapter 1 about what he did. He separated, he called, he made, he created. So God is the star there, okay? And there's no doubt that in the midst of a polytheistic culture, you had the Egyptian gods, you had these other gods surrounding Israel, that the biblical God is not like that. He's not a God of chaos. He's a God of order and harmony with the world he's made. He's the way he created the universe has order. It's set up correctly. It's not chaotic. And that is a bit sharp contrast to some of these other surrounding polytheistic gods, okay? That's why when, in the medieval period, when a lot of the scientists started the scientific process, they all believed that the God of the Bible, or even some kind of deistic God, some God that is a God of order that created the natural laws, where the universe turned out to be uniform, rational, intelligible. They could understand the universe and do their science. And so that's why a lot of them believed in God. They all generally were not atheists. It's written about more in this book here, The Genesis of Science, how the Christian Middle Ages launched a scientific revolution. And so that's because they looked at the universe, how the laws of nature were set up. They were uniform, rational, intelligible, and they could, observe cause and effect relationships. They were orderly and not chaotic. And so that played a large role. A polytheistic deity could not do that. It had to be a different kind of God. Okay. Now, some people ask, why did God create? Did he create because he was up in heaven and he was lonely? He said, darn, I need to create some people. I'm lonely and I don't have any fellowship, sitting around bored. That's not really why God created. Creation, of course, is a free act of God, but God is a triune being, meaning that he's in perfect harmony, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So he didn't need to create. He shares his triune nature with us, right? He shares that with humans. He decides to share that love, that unity, that fellowship that he has with humanity, and he creates humans, okay? Of course, the Bible talks about the heavens are telling the glory of God. He does it to declare his glory. He created for his glory. And of course, we know in Romans 1, as it says here, number 3, in Romans 1, that is one of the primary ways God gives knowledge of himself to the world, by what he's made. You can't see God directly, which is a good thing, because as he told Moses, you die. But the point is that we can look at the natural world around us and make inferences to a God behind, a creator's behind certain features of reality. And we can look at God's handiwork. So that's one of the main ways he communicates to humans, right? By what he's made. And so, people say, well, I want to know if God exists. He should just come talk to me. He should appear to me. Well, you can start by observing, using your 5 senses, look at the world around you and start seeing that as Paul says in Romans 1, it's clear as day. There is a creator behind what he's made. Now, of course, Romans 1 goes on to talk about people don't want God, and so they turn away from that and start rationalizing it and start worshiping the creation, right? Then that leads to idolatry. That's a whole topic in itself. Now, how did God create? The Bible says, of course, he created by the word of his power. He spoke it, it came into being. He said, let us make man in our image. So you have something called verbal revelation, non-verbal revelation, where somehow God uses speech. He condescends to us and he uses human language to communicate to us, right? So that's what he's doing there when he communicates to how he created. Said he spoke it. Now, just to remember, when you think of that, God speaking, it's like John Lennox says in his book, 7 Days That Divide the World. It doesn't mean like God has like a physical voice box. As far as we know, he's spirit. I don't know what it looks like when it says, and God said. I don't know how it's done. I have no idea. I'm not smart enough. I don't understand it completely, but it's obviously, it denotes real communication, but when I think of God speaking, I don't think of like a human with a human voice box speaking. So I don't really know how that works. But the point is that that's the way God, did it. It's through verbal, communication. Now, let's talk a little bit about something that is important. That's the issue of a few things about Genesis that are really important. That's the issue of whether Genesis has things in it that really match the real world around us. That there's things in Genesis that obviously are seen in reality. This isn't like a book of fiction that has nothing to say about the real world, right? And there's 3 things just briefly I want to mention. That's the first thing is the value and dignity of humans. And secondly is cosmology, and then the fall of man. Now, when it comes to the value and dignity of humans, I think we probably know that people spend the majority of their lives fighting for other humans. We think that we're morally obligated to help other people. We think people matter. We start social justice causes, or we fight for this people group or that people group, or we speak out on behalf of others, or we speak out for the orphan, the widow, or even non-Christians, fight for humans all the time. People matter, Black Lives Matter, this people group matters, that people group matters, the list goes on. So the point is that we tend to think humans are pretty important. They're pretty sacred and they seem to have dignity and value. Where does that come from? Where does that come from? Well, there's no doubt books have been written about this, by the way, but there's no doubt in our worldview that it teaches that God created us in his image, and that lays the groundwork for human rights, value, and dignity, that all humans, come from. It's a gift, that God gives us. He endows us, because we're creating his image. We don't earn it. We're intrinsically valued. It means that it's not based just on our function, what we do. If we do something, if we, come up with a great project or a great invention, that means that we have value or dignity. No, it's God's created us in his eyes. We all have value and dignity based on what we can or can't do. Okay, let's take someone that can't contribute anything. Maybe they have a physical disablement, or they can't speak, or they're in a wheelchair all their lives or something. Does that mean they don't have value because they can't contribute what a guy who's perfectly healthy can? No. In God's eyes, we all have human dignity and value, irrespective of our age, gender, ethnicity, or whatever, right? And we have the responsibility to secure and protect those rights. So if we remember this and carry out this around us, we could fix a lot of the problems around us. But instead, people have forgotten this, and they're trying to find other ways to ground human dignity and value through government, or through some other philosophy, which they all fall short in some capacity. And so the point is that the creation mandate lays the groundwork for that. That we're all created in the image of God. We all have value and dignity. The Declaration of Independence says that. Unalienable rights, right? So someone says, well, the government gives me rights. Well, if the government takes away your rights, I don't know what you're going to do. My rights come from God. So government takes them away, I still have rights I'm creating the image and likeness of God. Now, let's talk a little about cosmology. That's the study of how the universe came together, right? How the universe all got set up correctly and why we're here. Of course, you have to have the right universe. The greatest miracle in the beginning, in Genesis says, in the beginning, God created heavens and earth. If that miracle is true, then every other miracle is possible in the Bible. If God created the universe from nothing, then people can rise from the dead. If God created the universe from nothing, then Jesus can feed 5,000 or be virgin born, or, the list goes on. So people don't believe that the universe came in existence by God. They don't believe in the greatest miracle. They're going to have a problem with the other miracles, right? But if you accept the first miracle, then the other ones seem to fall into place, okay? Because that's a pretty amazing thing, that God could take nothing, like create something outside the natural world, create the natural world, I should say, and set it up so we can be here. So at the beginning of the universe, when it came into existence at the beginning point, they used to think the universe was eternal, that it always existed, but then the evidence came in that it had a beginning point. That's when science starts. It starts at the beginning of the universe. That's when the laws of nature come to existence. That's when science can start being a real thing, because science relies on the laws of nature, right? It's descriptions of the way nature works. And that is when everything starts, when the whole scientific process begins. And that was at the beginning of the universe. Not only at the beginning of the universe when this happened, it's when the universe is set up a certain way for us to be here. The laws of nature were set up a certain way. So the evidence came in that the universe had a beginning. That's when cosmology shifted a long time ago. And they said, oh, the universe isn't eternal anymore. We thought it always was. Now it has a beginning point. And a lot of these guys came along and they said, wow, it seems that, hey, what it seems like what we're seeing now in the universe, they found out had a beginning. It kind of sounds like, even if you believe in some sort of Big Bang or beginning point, however we define the Big Bang, whatever, the cosmological evidence shows we have a beginning point now in cosmology. It sounds a lot like Genesis. It sounds a lot like what they've been saying all along. In the beginning, God created. In the beginning. Well, now the universe has a beginning. So that was a big debate, still ongoing, obviously, but that was something that Genesis had talked about for a long time, that in the beginning God created. It doesn't necessarily tell us everything about cosmology, but the point is that the evidence came in, and some of these cosmologists and scientists were like saying, oh my goodness, it does sound a bit like what Christians or biblical people were saying all along. You can get a lot of information about that issue in the book by Stephen Meyer called The Return of the God Hypothesis. He talks about one of the arguments, one of the most important scientific discoveries in the last 50 years is the universe had a beginning. You can read about that there. You don't need the Bible necessarily to explain the science, but anyway, he lays that out quite effectively in that book. So you can get that and study it all you want. Now, something else that Genesis talks about that definitely matches reality is there's something wrong with humans. As I said, we can do some really incredible things, but it seems like mankind is degenerating. We seem to be obviously subject to decay, and we see that humans can do some pretty horrific things. As I said, some incredible things, but some pretty horrific things. And remember that obviously when God created us, he said it was good. He said human nature is good, the creation's good. He didn't say it's bad. He didn't start out and say everything's bad about humans. No, he said it's good. I created humans. They possess the divine image, that makes it good in their very nature. But then something happens in the fall of man where we're damaged after that. And it seems that we have some corruption and we don't really act the way God wanted us to act, obviously. Now, as far as original sin, I'll talk about that more in a second. I have a couple of slides before you jump to conclusions. But it does make sense of the human experience and all of world history that the doctrine of original sin makes a lot of sense. That it's verifiable. There's something very off about humans. The way we treat people and cultures and countries, and you look at genocide and all kinds of things. There's something very wrong with human beings. Now we could blame it on sociology and psychology and all kinds of things. Those things can be studied and examined, but fundamentally there seems to be something very wrong with humans. Okay, and now when we think of original sin, we're talking about, some people say, well, that means that you're born with sin. You come into the world with sin. You're in sin. We're born with a condition. I don't really know what happens when we come out of our mother's womb. I don't know if we have sin transmitted to us when we come out of the womb. We're born with a sin nature. Is it like something that's passed on, genetically? I don't really know. I don't think we can know. The Bible doesn't talk about it. It just says that we certainly have sin, and we certainly have we're born. It talks about being dead in trespasses and sins. I don't know for sure how it's transmitted from one person to the other. I don't know how it's transmitted from Adam to us. The Bible doesn't tell us. But the point is that we sin inevitably. Okay, and then eventually we're going to sin, even if we don't know how it's going to happen. At some point in our lives, we're going to make a decision that's sin. We're going to commit a sin. We're going to sin more. So we have a potentiality to sin, and then we actualize it at some point. Okay, so I don't know if we need to debate all day about how sin is transmitted to us. I know the Jewish people they don't believe in original sin. That's a Catholic thing, or that's something Augustine came up with, or something. That's really not a really relevant point. Whether you believe in how it's transmitted or not, or you don't accept it, the point is that we all sin, and Jewish people believe in sin too. They believe that they sin. That's why they have to go to Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah. Every year they have to go through the high holiday season to confess their sins to each other and to God. So the point is that we do sin, and there's something wrong with humans. Yes, it is related to Adam. Adam is our federal head, and he blew it. And we know that we're related to him. He is our, the head of the human race, the federal headship, as we say. I just don't know exactly how it's transmitted to us. I'm not sure we really know for sure, but the point is that we do sin. Also, let's talk a little bit also about the genre of Genesis. When you think about genre, that's the kind of literature Genesis is. Like when you say, you like jazz music, or you like rock music, or you like contemporary, that's the genre you like. But when it comes to like the book of Revelation, we know that the genre of Revelation is apocalyptic literature, whereas Psalms is poetry. The Gospels are biographies. They're a special kind of ancient biographies. So the Bible has different kind of genres, right? But Genesis, we have a genre for Genesis too. We have to look at the cultural and literary context in which it was written. Some people say, over the years, they'll say, well, Genesis is like a myth. It's just a non-scientific account of how the world came to be. They might say that myth is like something that defines, that you define myth as something like the actions of superhuman beings, like gods or superhuman heroes. Or some people might say, well, myth is like a fiction opposed to history. It's not historical, it's made up, like a fantasy thing. So myth can also be, depending on how you define myth, it can be like a type of literature that's written in poetic form, has highly symbolic language, but it's about real events. So when people are talking about myth, make sure how they define it. Obviously, this isn't going to work, where we think Genesis, some people think Genesis is like the Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. They think it's like fiction. These aren't real people, real places. It's just a bunch of fiction to tell us a nice story about humanity. That's not what we're saying Genesis is. It comes to Genesis, like, when Jesus uses metaphorical language, he says, I am the door, I'm the bread of life. Obviously, you can use metaphorical language to point to literal experience of salvation, eternal life. But just like anything else in the Bible, whether it be Genesis or anything else, you have to interpret it in its historical, grammatical context. You have to study it contextually. You've got to understand the culture and background situation it was written in. There's no doubt that Genesis does use anthropomorphic language. There's things that God is doing human-like things, speaking, creating, seeing, self-consulting to point humans over creation, doing things like when God walks in the garden. Do I think is God walking in the garden? Technically, no. I think that's anthropomorphic language to describe God, right? God doesn't literally have arms, his outstretched arm, or he gets like he, the list goes on. These human things these anthropomorphic language we see. Obviously, that doesn't mean that God, they're not factual, that God isn't really God and God doesn't exist. It just that the Bible is using anthropomorphic language to describe what God's doing. It's nothing wrong with that. It's just God's condescending to come to us, to helping us to understand who he is. Now, when we say, is Genesis historical, people are asking, are these real events? Are they real people and real events? Is Genesis 1 to 11 historical in the sense that they really happen? And yes, it can be an historical narrative, even if it uses metaphors and figures of speech. For example, some people may say, were there two literal or historical people walked this earth named Adam and Eve? Or was there really an ark, and was there a worldwide flood? Or did God create the world in 624 hours a day? Or was there a group of humans? Were there super giants like the Nephilim? People ask these questions. But there's no doubt, if you read Genesis, it seems to be recording real people. If you read Genesis 1 to 11 in a linear genealogy, this are the 10 generations that list from Adam to Noah and 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. And Genesis chapters 5, 10, 11, that it lists these genealogies. It talks about these are the generations of, this is the history of. So yes, it seems to be listing things historically. These are real people. Of course, the New Testament affirms the historicity of Adam and Eve as well. Goes on to talk about Adam and Eve in the New Testament. Jesus talks about it. Paul talks about Adam as well. So they seem to be real names and descriptions of geographical locations in Genesis, which have been confirmed. This isn't like just writing Harry Potter stuff or fiction. There's no doubt that Adam, the historical Adam has been a big thing, been debated, the issue of Adam. There's been books written about that. I think there's a lot of good evidence to show that, we came from, that's another book that came out recently, The Genealogical Adam and Eve. But this is generally the traditional view that we have of Adam, or in Eve, that there's two actual people named Adam and Eve, that were a special result of God's creation. They have a biological relationship to all humans that are alive today. Their DNA is our DNA, and they sinned, died, and brought death into the world. And therefore, obviously, that carries on to us. And so it'd be awfully hard to deny an historical Adam, when it comes to how the gospel is laid out. Why do we need redemption? Why do we need to be forgiven? Is it because it's related to something as a result of what Adam did? There's a tie in there of some kind. Paul refers to Adam many times. If you read these passages in Romans and 1 Corinthians, he talks about, just as sin entered the world through one man, death through sin. He talks about one man, talks about Jesus is the second Adam, things like that. So Adam is definitely related to, what Jesus did. Jesus is reversing what Adam did, that caused sin to enter into the world and caused death, that Jesus is reversing that. So, obviously theologically, biblically, Adam plays a certainly important role. As I said, the New Testament speaks a lot about Adam. It reaffirms that Adam and Eve in several places, right? So there was an article that came out a ways back talking about how humans descended from two people. the wiped out species 100,000 years ago. Kind of interesting. So you can go read that if you want when I send out the PDF. Now, there's been some challenges as far as what the scientific challenges, Adam and Eve. There's been some population genetic studies, and people have tried to show that, or scientists have tried to show that we couldn't have come from a pair due to population studies. That's been challenged in that article right there by a biologist, Ann Geiger and Colin Reeves. But my own opinion, if you want to get this, I can't lay it all out, but there's a pretty good book by these guys, actually unearthed creationists. It's called Supernatural Creation of Adam and Eve by, well, no, that's not the name of the book. That's the chapter in the book called Genetics Confirms the Recent Supernatural Creation of Adam and Eve by Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins. It's in that book right there called Searching for Adam. There's a really good chapter in that. They lay out why the genetic evidence and everything lays out as far as what we know about population studies and why you could give you can give a solid case for believing we came from a single pair. But that's one of the best chapters I've read in a while on that. I like that chapter. Now, you may not agree with that, but anyway, you'd have to you can get it on Kindle. I think that book for like $8.99 or $7.99, but there's a really good chapter in that. So don't let people intimidate you by saying the science has just shown we can't come from a single pair. The science has shown population studies that there's, Adam and Eve doesn't work, even though, biblically it has to work. But the point is that there is good scientific backing. That chapter is really helpful. And so anyway, that's one of my recommendations. Now, I think that going back here, I think if we want to go back to the 3 points I make here about this issue of claims about reality, these things really play a role in our world today. Whether we're created in the image of God and whether we have dignity and value, that is a huge issue with where we're going as a culture. If you think about the debates about COVID, quite frankly, we are fighting for humans. People are fighting. We need to preserve life. We need to protect life. We need to think of other people. We need to think about whatever your view is on that. There seems to be a lot of humans thinking that humans matter and the human life needs to be preserved and humans have dignity and value. We need to preserve life. Well, what's the grounding point for that? Well, we just do, because we need to keep the human race going, by golly, and it's about survival of the fittest. Maybe that's your evolutionary view. A lot of people believe that. My view is that humans are created in the image and likeness of God. They all have value, obviously. So that's an important talking point for today. Just think about that. And of course, the universe that we came into existence, by God. And of course, the fall. What is wrong with humans? Why am I looking on the news every day? Besides the fact we decided to defund the police, which hasn't worked out, as crime is soaring in many cities, and people are just mugging people right and left, and people are getting shot. But there's something very wrong with humans. What is wrong with humans that we do some incredibly immoral things? Why is it? What explains that? So these are some things we need to remember, that Genesis can help us with these issues, and our worldview helps us explain these issues. And so these worldview questions back here, I mentioned at the very beginning, that these worldview questions all around us, people are asking them these questions, and we have a worldview that helps us with that. And definitely Genesis can play a role there. Now, as I said, you don't need Genesis to know there's a God. You don't need Genesis to know there's a designer behind the universe. You can study the science itself, as Stephen Meyer does in that book, the Return of the God Hypothesis. That seems to be the evidence is so strong in the sciences alone that there's a creator behind the universe. But the point is, if you want to know what that God has for you, what his purpose is for you, then you're going to have to open Genesis. Okay, I mean, you got to go beyond just believing. I mean, deists can believe that God created the universe, but you've got to go beyond that to go into the Bible to see what God's purpose for us is and what's wrong with the world and how we can fix it, and we can be redeemed, and obviously help other people be redeemed and really fulfill our role as image bearers of God, because obviously a lot of people are not doing that. They're looking for purpose and identity in other things other than in their identity in God and their identity and being image bearers of God. That's their core identity. They're just missing it, right? They're finding their identity in gender and sexuality and politics and this thing and that thing and this cause and that cause, but they're not finding their core identities being image bearers of God. So we need to, hopefully we can take people back to that, right? Okay, well, we have someone in the chat room who commented a long time ago. Julie said, cool. Thanks, Julie. I'm cool. I know you're cool too. It's all cool. I watch Happy Days growing up. Happy Days, it's the greatest show of all time, right? If my computer's not working right now, I'll pull a Fonzie, just go like that 2 times and it's fixed, right? Yeah, sure. Break my keyboard. Anyway, anybody want to open up for chat, discussion? I'm all ears. It's 8:45. Anybody want to talk about anything? Questions, comments?
Yeah, I would like to say that, like you mentioned about basically about evolution.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes some people they bring the points. They say that because people, the human, the creation of evolution.
Uh-huh.
So like people, the monkeys turn into a human slowly. And the question is that if the monkeys, when there was a monkeys before, and then the monkeys turned into humans, and they became human later on. So monkeys are still there. So why not now? Monkeys are turning into humans, so, right? So
Yeah. I had a slide. I got rid of it, unfortunately, because I ran out of time. That I had a pretty good source to show you that there's still not enough time for that to happen, for humans to evolve from monkeys or whatever. I mean, there's just, darn it, I can't find it. I'm looking for it right now because I got rid of it when I did this PowerPoint because I just didn't have enough time. Let me see if I could find it real quick. Just give me a second here. I don't know if I can find it. Let's see here. Genesis. Do I have it? Well, anyway, I'm not going to have time to look for that all night, but I have, there's some good evidence to show there's just not enough time for the things that have to work out to work, for evolution to happen, where a monkey actually evolves into a human.
yeah,
It doesn't matter if you have billions of years, there's not enough time still. It's still not going to work. And there's other problems with it. Now, you know, as I said, you could believe, you know, some people bring up, you know, the issue we have shared DNA or something, which is another comment they make, which is has to be explained because the percentage isn't necessarily right. They quote, we have shared common DNA with other mammals too, you know, not just apes. So big whoopity-doo-dah day. It doesn't really mean that there's no God involved. It could just be that we have a shared common designer, you know.
Yeah.
So if they did say that, we have common DNA with a lot of other species, not just monkeys. Okay,
Yeah.
so it doesn't really do much. But as far as the debate over, you know, the common descent, whether we came from, you know, we would have to say, obviously, we believe Adam and Eve are the first specially created humans, and we certainly believe that we, you know, we came from them, you know. Whether there's evidence that we share, just because we share DNA with other species or other mammals or things, doesn't mean that, you know, the whole evolution molecules demand things true. You know what I mean? So there's other problems. And I also, when I send out the slide set, I'll send out that extra slide I have about that that issue. But I don't really see that as being a huge issue. Is that what you're talking about? They say we came from monkeys, and that's
Yeah, because
like the most
mostly,
important thing, or
yeah. Yeah, science also says like similar almost that, yeah. So, but anyway, biblically, yeah, I understand your point. So, but biblically, like as we know, and we know that it's not like a monkeys or something. It's of course the creation of God. And like Psalm 19:1, you have also mentioned in your presentation. So that is, I like that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. So
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, like I said, if you're a if you're a theistic evolutionist, you don't have a problem with God using their species like they were, you don't have a problem with, you wouldn't, if you're a theistic evolution, you wouldn't have a problem with biological evolution like the common things we have with apes or something else. Like they would just say, or they might say that Adam and Eve were the special, there was people around the other cultures at the time, Adam and Eve, but Adam and Eve are the first specially created people that God breathed his spirit into. So they would say that, we may have, there may have been humans around as well. Now, obviously, Untitled Creationists would say, no, Adam and Eve are the first specially created. There were no other humans, they're the first humans, right? There are no other people around them. And so that's the debate between creation models and things like that. But you could always say just a common designer. So someone says, well, we share DNA with monkeys. I mean, the percentage is always wrong what they give, but I would say, well, we share DNA with other species as well. So does that mean we have, what's that mean? Because there's a whole bunch of other species we share DNA with. So we could just have a common designer.
Yeah.
So God, it's like a car, you have one car, you have whatever. So yeah, so I'll send out that other slide, but I still don't think there's enough time, which I'll show you. Yeah,
no
there's yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Do you have any other questions? Any other questions, anybody? Or do you have another question? Go ahead. I don't care. Comments, anybody? Aye, Julie says A. Why not B? Anybody? Anybody else? Any other comments, questions? Well, you guys are quiet tonight. Everyone's got Genesis all figured out, huh? Okay, good. Angela, you want to ask another question? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
You're the only one that's unmuted.
Yeah, basically, because people are not, when they debate, so when we are talking about Bible, so we tell them that, okay, you do whatever you are doing religiously, but just read Bible as well. So then you will find out that what is truth, or you will come to know that what Bible says. The problem is that they don't want to do it. They are so stubborn and all in the heart that they don't want to do this, that we are okay, so we don't want to read Bible. But praise Lord that people who are not stubborn kind of, and they go into and they go read Genesis. Of course, even the scientists, doctors, they turn their hearts. There are many testimonies there. So that's a big problem. Basically, people are not trying to read Bible. They believe that it's kind of a sin to if they are reading Bible, and because they are not, they are reading some other religion's holy book. So
well, yeah, I mean, if someone doesn't want to read the Bible, I mean, I can't force them to do it, but I mean, I gotta be honest with you, if I start with somebody who's biblically illiterate, they've never read the Bible, I don't start with Genesis with them. I tell them, go read the book of John,
yes,
to get into who Jesus is. And then, I mean, that's what I started. I started to read the four Gospels more than anything when I was a new believer, so I didn't get into Genesis till pretty much later on after that. So, I mean, you got to read Genesis, obviously, but
yes.
I'm saying, I just started out the book of John or something to see if they're open to it. But yeah, some people just, if they're not interested in reading it, they're not interested in reading it. You can't make them read it. You can lead a horse, not the horse to water, make him drink. It's, you can lead a person to, there's another saying I have of it. You can give someone the knowledge, but you can't make them think. That's what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. That's
anyway.
so cool. Yeah.
So they may just not have the knowledge because they don't read the Bible. So therefore they can't think about it.
Yeah, of course, when we talk about God, so of course we will let them know that to go first for John, the book of John. But once you are talking about evolution or the creation, so of course you like to talk about Genesis as well. So let them know about that too. So
well, the problem is though, as I showed you right here on the slide, Sam, I'll get to you in a second. I'll see you're unmuted. Give me a second here. I have to pull it back up. The problem we have, like right here, darn it, you guys are blocking trying to bring that slide up here. Just give me a second. It's not enough room on this. There's scientific problems. There's things that are debated scientifically about the issues with chemical and biological evolution still being debated. They had a meeting in London about 4 years ago, the Royal Hall meeting, where they had all these evolutionists came together, and they said, we've got to come up with, we've got a model here that has so many gaps of knowledge and so many unknowns. We've got to come up with some new, new models here that some of these things are just outdated. So it's still a work in progress, that, there's issues scientifically that they're working on and still trying to figure out, and there's problems with it. So you don't necessarily have to make it into someone says, oh, you believe the Bible and I believe in evolution and science backs evolution. No, the science is debated on a lot of things. There's some things there's agreement about, as far as random mutation, natural selection takes place. No duh. There's some things, there's some things that are obviously they're pretty true or pretty solidified, but not the whole molecules demand model.
Yes.
That we came from unguided processes and that just came together, and then somehow it just got going, and then everything just took off from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's scientific issues. So I don't let them get away with it. Once again, you have to define what you mean. And you have to have these three things. You still got to have the right universe. You've got to have the right planet. You've got to have how life can come from non-life. You got to come up with the information that goes into the genetic code that helps. The DNA codes, the instruction manual tells the cell what to do. Where'd that instruction manual come from? So there's just all kinds of things, going on that you could bring up. That right here, if you get that book, Theistic Evolution, that second one, there's some really, really good scientific chapters in that I'm not even competent to read because I'm not a, strictly speaking, a scientist. But I mean, they really bring up some scientific issues in that book alone. So anyway. So don't get intimidated. There's always scientific issues you can learn about too, problems.
Yes, that's right. You should like at least some basic knowledge we should have to debate with the people when they bring their points, of course. Yeah, that's right.
Well, first of all, you want to ask them what they mean by evolution when they say it. There's like 7 or 8 definitions of evolution. So it's a useless debate if they're just going to say, do you believe in evolution or creation? It's just it's so simplistic and so ridiculous that it's like, I'd have to, like I said, you have to ask questions. What do you mean by creationists? What do you mean by evolution?
Yeah.
Like I said in the slide set. Yeah. Sam, you want to ask a question? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just trying to actually making a comment. The original sin doctrine seems to be more of a Latin, based on the Latin translation of the Bible, because it's interesting, both the Greek Orthodox have the Greek original language, and the Judaism, the Hebrew language, do not adhere to original sin doctrine. But of course, both camps believe we will eventually sin, because we're self-centered. Then we will need redemption, because one way or the other we will sin.
Right. But there are some passages in the intertestamental literature. I had it on a document I taught at Beth Messiah, and I can't find it because I got so many darn documents that I looked it up. There are some passages in Second Baruch and some other passages that speak of original sin, darn it, and I can't find it. So there are some small passages that teach it.
All right.
But Judaism believes in a sin inclination and a good inclination. Isn't that far away, you know what I mean, from some sort of sin. But so it's really the point is Adam fell. So we see the fall of man all throughout history. You can see that carried out. There's something wrong with humans.
Yeah.
Now, how it's transmitted to humans, I have no idea, but humans sin and there's something that happens. I don't know what it is, but so I don't really care anymore if Augustine taught it or who taught it. The point is that would be genetic. That's also called a genetic fallacy, where you reject it because where it came from. You can't do that because that doesn't really work sometimes. You can't just reject it outright because say Augustine made it up at this time period. Well, that if it's biblical, it's biblical. You know what I mean? Now, if it's not biblical, that's another thing. But there is some Jewish passages that talk about it. But the point is we sin. Sin always is there. The potentiality to sin is in humans. Now we actualize it at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was when I stole my first pack of Lifesavers at age like 4 in the drugstore, and I came home and my conscience bothered me so much. I showed my dad. I walked up to him and I showed it, and I was crying. He said, "Where'd you get that?" And I said, "I stole it. I took it from the drugstore." He drove me right back to maybe walk up in the front of everybody, the cash register, and hand it back to them. And that was my punishment because I was so embarrassed. I was crying. It was traumatizing, but it worked. It worked. I knew I did something wrong. I stole it. You know what I mean? I wanted that pack of lifesavers. I did it behind his back. I grabbed it and I stuck it in my pocket. I thought I could get away with it, but then my conscience got to me, right? So anyway, for some people it's worse than that. But anyway, what's that?
Now we know what's the problem with you, Eric.
That's right.
Traumatized.
Right. And right now it could be
counselor.
for you, Sam. What you did is you took a baseball, you were playing baseball and you broke that window. You didn't tell your mom it was you who did it. When the neighbor came and said, "Did you hit that baseball?" "No, Mom, it wasn't me. It was something else. I don't know how that baseball got in that window." Right. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, so I agree. Sin is certainly there. I don't know how it's transmitted, but we end up inevitably sinning.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like I said, the amazing fact is both Judaism and the Greek Orthodox, who have the Greek translation, which is their language, they don't have the
Greek Orthodox. They'd be speaking Aramaic, right?
No, both Greek and Aramaic.
Bad joke. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
They don't have that concept of original sin. It's only getting into until you get into the Latin church.
Right.
But we sin because we're selfish. One way or the other, we will sin.
Oh, yeah. And there's a book called The Riddle of Original Sin. I have it on my Bible software by a theologian from years ago. The original Henry Blocher or something. It's I don't know how you pronounce his last name. Blocher. It's a pretty well-known book. InterVarsity put it about, but it's called Original Sin: The Riddle of Original Sin. So, many theologians have pondered for decades, how sin is transmitted, how does it work, and they've debated this forever. Paul says, we're dead in trespasses and sins. We're made alive in Messiah. I don't know what that means. We're dead. Are we dead in our sins when we come into this world? I mean, Messiah rose from the dead to make us alive to God. So we were dead to something. It's not like we're alive to God. So I don't know what that means. So we have like a sin nature. Nature, the study of a nature is a metaphysical concept in philosophy, the nature of something. So, the point is there's something about us that needs to be made alive. We're dead to the things of God. That's why Messiah rose. He makes us alive. So I don't know how it works. I don't know. But all I know is that I sinned regularly before I became a believer. I had no qualms about it. And then I had a new birth, and the Spirit of God made me alive to God. And, I have a new nature now. I mean, my nature's been made alive to God, however. So, yeah. So I don't know how that works. Dead in trespasses and sins, made alive to God. That's why God's awesome what he does. So, yeah. Okay. Well, no, good point. I agree. I'm aware of that. Every Jewish person I've ever tried to, the biggest challenge to witnessing to a Jewish person is the following. Why do I need a Messiah to atone for my sin? I don't believe in, they'll say, I don't believe in original sin. It's not like we're wretched sinners that need atonement and redemption. I mean, we're pretty good people. Yeah, we sin sometimes. We have to go through Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, but we need atonement. But they don't view each other the way Christians view each other, the way Christians view humans as depravity. They don't really have human depravity in their mix. You know what I mean? The way we view it. Now, human depravity can be viewed as, yes, humans are depraved, they're morally depraved, but we still can do some things good, whereas total moral depravity says we can't do anything good. You know what I mean? So I would say I have like a middle view, yeah, we're depraved, but we still can do some good things because we're creating image and likeness of God. But we certainly can do some pretty horrific things. So yeah, Jewish people don't have that concept of moral depravity the way we do.
Well, I don't think we need to be total depravity, because sin, the definition of sin, is fall short of God's total glory. Well, just give me one example. Who can say that I am a full representation of God, that I am his full glory, other than the only one person can say that is Jesus Christ, not even Paul, not even Abraham.
Right. And that's what God's doing in us every day. He's restoring us.
That's why we are sinners.
Right.
Because we fall short of the glory of God.
Right. But it is true that most people will not come to faith in Messiah unless they see their sin. I mean, I didn't come to faith in Messiah because I thought I was a pretty good guy. You know what I mean? I mean, I got convicted of my sin, you know, and God, I remember that I heard a sermon, it convicted me. Hey, I'm not such a good guy. I have broken the ways of God. I need forgiveness. So,
Yeah.
you know, this thing that, you know, some people, I think they join the faith. I've seen people say, I don't believe it. I don't believe it anymore. And I'm going to leave the faith, whatever. It just doesn't make any sense. Well, I always ask them, or I always challenge them, did you ever see a point where your sin offended God? Your sin was an issue. Did you ever see that? Some of them will say no. I think they join the Christian faith for its benefits, for its social benefits, or something like that, something else. They never really saw their sin. Therefore, I don't even know if they're ever even converted to begin with. Now, only God knows, you know. But anyway. So.
Well, I think any misrepresentation of God is sin, because
Sure.
God doesn't lie per se. But when I lie, I misrepresent him to be
Right.
the image of God. So I already sinned it. I already need a redeemer.
Yeah.
So anybody told me they'll never lie in their whole life?
Right.
Show me one person.
No. You break one commandment, you've broken them all. I mean, you're
Yeah.
guilty. So it's just there. We got no shot without God intervening. So, yep. Anyway, no, we did. Obviously, we definitely sin. So anyway, yeah, good points. Anyway, anybody else? Any other comments?
Eric, once again, you have done a wonderful, wonderful study on tonight. I really appreciate the point of you bringing out that if we attribute Moses to be the writer of Genesis, as he recorded these events, that his purpose is, as he's teaching these and to the children of Israel, the new generation of the children of Israel. And I think we, kind of lose sight of that. And I think it kind of shifts and will change out even a lot of how we may even view a lot of Genesis when we read it, if we read it from the point that Moses is dictating this to God's people while they're in the wilderness. So I really appreciate that point. But whenever I look at Genesis, I've come to like this little corny little joke that says some scientists got together and they thought they finally figured out how to make man. So they challenged God to a duel and they said, we see that you could make man, but we want you to make your man, and we're going to make man as well. And so then once again, God, he does his creative process and he brings forth man and breathes into him this new life, and the man is fully man. And they said, that's good. Now watch what we do. And so then they went outside and gathered up some dirt, and God said, wait a minute. You have to get your own dirt. So,
right.
And that's just one of those little corny jokes I like sometimes, to be able to, and just really put those things in a perspective. Everything that everyone talks about when it comes down, especially to challenging out Genesis, whether it was evolution and all these things, they're taking things from what was created to define what is created, when it's just like, no, wait a minute, you got to get something else to define that. And I've always liked the simple fact that when Moses is writing, he doesn't write with the challenge, like, if there is a God. This is like, this, it is a God, and this is him.
Right. I agree. Now, let me also mention something about Moses. So I would say probably if you read the end of Joshua, I think Joshua had to finally he says Moses died. So Joshua probably had to edit something, something at the end there, because, Moses was dead. So I would agree that Joshua probably had to edit some of Moses' stuff at the very end, when Moses after he died, which just makes sense, because you see Moses, you read it, Moses died, and, that's what happens. So whatever. So the point is that may be a little tidbit just to throw in there, just to clarify. But yeah, the most important point there, Charles, like you said, is that who is he writing to? He's writing to that generation of Israelites coming out of the wilderness. You know what I mean? They came out of, they had all that Egyptian background, all that stuff. He has to show them this is the one true God. This is who God is. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of his. So that's very important. Because I think a lot of times we just miss that. And that's why, to be honest, Charles, I don't think Moses is wrestling with some of the questions we're asking today. The author of Genesis isn't wrestling with how old is the earth? Is it young or old? Or You know, what about, you know, just there's certain questions we're asking today as Westerners 2,000 years later. You know, we're trying to figure it out. But he didn't obviously have to wrestle with some of those things as much as we do now, right? So, yeah.
Yep, totally agree.
Yep. So
Great
that's what
lesson
happens when
again.
you have a gap of history, gap of culture, gap of time, everything. Julie's got her mute off.
I do.
I thought you weren't coming.
I hate it. The book
Oh.
about the riddle of the original book of sin.
Oh, you want me to post that? I'll find it right now.
Yeah, great.
I know you're gonna buy it right now. So
That's
hold
right.
on.
I'm on it.
Just a second. I'll find it right now.
Want to make sure I get the right one.
Here it is. Just a second. Okay, well, I'm gonna post the Barnes and Noble link, but you can look it up on Facebook or on Amazon. Okay.
Is this by Henry? Or
I
is
got
this
it right here. Yeah, not Henry Goulet. Here, different Henry. Here you go.
Henry Blocher.
Well, oop, that's a lot to pay. That's a lot to link on.
I
Here,
have one of Henry Blocher.
Yep, that's it. That's it.
Okay, got it.
Called Original Sin, Illuminating the Riddle.
$11.77.
Oh my gosh, what are you gonna do, Julie?
I don't know.
I don't know if
Gotta
you can.
order it.
Here, I'm gonna put the Amazon link instead. Here
Thanks.
I'll make it a little easier. I don't know why, like anyone ever buys a book at Barnes and Noble anymore. There it is. There's the Amazon link. Yeah. So, yeah, there's certain, that's a decent book, decent introduction to it. But yeah. So, yeah, there's all kinds of books I recommended tonight. So you probably got all 10 of them, right? So anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah, I didn't really, I'll tell you, there is a part of Genesis I ran out of time to talk. Actually, I'd like to do it for another call. I think we're going to do the flood. Maybe I'd do that for an entire Zoom call in itself on the flood. I think the flood is a fascinating topic. Obviously, it's one of the most horrific topics. It's devastating in a way, the way, God judged the entire world, talking about the flood, so it's one of the parts of Genesis that people go, wow, did God got really angry? Did he do that? It's like, yes, he did. I saw the movie. Did you ever see the movie on the flood with that Hollywood take they tried to do with Russell Crowe? Oh, that was funny. Anyway, some of these Hollywood takes.
There were alligators in there, and it just wasn't biblical.
No, there wasn't alligators. There were these weird rock creatures, weird rock creatures or so. I don't know what they were, but yeah, it wasn't meant to be entirely biblical. It wasn't meant to be entirely biblical, obviously, but that's a fascinating topic, though, the flood. So I'd like to look into that. Maybe we'll talk about that a little more. But has anyone been to Noah's Ark, the Ark Museum? God, I heard it's just gigantic, obviously. So, I mean, it's gigantic. So I have not seen it, the one in Kentucky, Ken Ham's thing. William, can you share with us another species? Oh God, I have to find that slide, William. I'm sorry. It's on a slide I had, and I had it's a different slide set from this Genesis one. This hold on, just give me a second, okay? I have to check one thing here. I'm trying to find it. Me and my 1,000 PowerPoints that I have. Can you give me a second? Let me see if I can find it. I'm looking. Maybe that's it. Nope, it's not it. Just a second. One more look. I know where I can find it. I just can't pull it up in time to do everything. It's on my Dropbox, and that's going to be kind of a pain to get up. Let's see here. Just give me a second. Genesis. That's not it. Genesis. Oh, wait a minute. Give me a second. I may be able to find it. Maybe this is it. Nope. Getting closer. Give me one more second. I'm going to try one more thing. And then I'll have to send it out. When I send out the email and everything for the slides and everything, I'll send it in that. I promise to do that.
Okay.
I promise it'll all, I have it all on a slide. Questions. Julie, you're in that class, the big questions class. Darn it, you're supposed to have everything. Big questions, class 6. Class. Let me try one last thing. Maybe this, no, that's not it. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna have to send it out by email. If you look on the, I'll have 2 slides added to the one I sent out on this one that I showed you tonight. I'll have 2 slides of the one I was talking to Angelia about, and then the one you're asking. I had it, I just couldn't, I cut some things out tonight because it was just so long, but then I realized that, hey, now we need it. How about that? Isn't that fun? That's the point of being a teacher, not knowing what to have and what to cut. But I do have it on a slide set, so I'll add that in there. You can look at it, and then you can email me if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Okay, good. I appreciate you bringing that up, though. Anybody else? By the way, even if we have shared DNA with any other animal, humans are drastically different from animals in the creation, right? We are at a different, we're not like just, people say, are just animals. No, not really. We're drastically different from animals in many ways. Okay, we can do logic, we can do philosophy, we can, the human language is vastly different. The language we have. So there's all kinds of things that are humans that mark us very different. So no, and even apes, monkeys, whatever. So I mean, we're so different in so many ways, vastly different. So anyway, I got a funny story to tell really quick. This happened once. So I was at the San Diego Zoo once when I lived in San Diego, and we were at the gorilla, the gorilla section they have. So I was with 3 of my friends, and they were really troublemakers, as I may say. We're only 18 or 19 at the time. And they decided to pull out a pack of juicy fruit, and they start wadding it up and chewing it. And then they take it out of their mouth and they throw it at the gorillas. These wads of gum all around the gorillas, like 3 wads of juicy fruit. And I'm sitting there looking at them saying, you're going to get in trouble. We're going to get kicked out of the zoo any second. I'm going to have to I'm going to run over here and get away from you. Well, I look over at the gorillas. Sure enough, they're picking up the wads of gum and starting to go like this and play with them. And they kind of look at them like that and sniffing them, maybe licking them and playing with them, going like this, stretching them. And people are watching this at the zoo. The people, they're going, oh my gosh, look at that gorilla, he's playing with gum. And I'm sure somebody said, where did they get gum from? And anyway, so that was a very horrific experience. I thought I was going to go to jail that day. Anyway, not a funny story, just something I tell, true story. Say, what kind of friends do you have, Eric? They're all, I don't even know where they are, none of those guys. All right, anybody else, any other comments, questions, before we wrap up? Angeli, one more thing?
Yes, please. Yeah, if you could, can you please talk about Genesis 1:1? I just want to talk about, the question is related to heavens. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So basically, because God is from before he created the earth.
Yes.
It's already there. So
yes.
when it shows that God did a creation in 7 days, so the very first thing God did, the creation of earth and the heavens together, that means at the same time he did. So that means that there was no creation of heaven before. It was not existing. The heaven looks like from Bible.
Good question.
Yeah.
And that's something that I have not thought about in a long time. Very good point. I have not thought about that. Remember though, the word heaven, it can refer to just sky or space, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily, have to be like the physical heavens necessarily, right? It could just refer to just the sky or space, right?
Exactly.
So it depends on how you translate, the word heaven. Obviously, it's not just like, because it's an English translation, right?
Yeah.
So I'd have to look at it, but I think it's just, I think we're talking about more or less just the sky there, the space, but I'd have to look. But no, if you're going to say, well, you know, God, obviously there's, where's God? Isn't he in heaven, right? Well, if you created heaven, then where was God all along, right?
Yes.
But no, I don't think that that's necessarily talking about the heaven, like the heaven where we go when we die. I think it's translated mostly just sky or space, from what I remember. Can be translated just as sky. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
yeah. I mean, yeah. So that would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, of course, you know, when we talk about heaven, so our eyes goes up there. So like in Psalm 121 says that our eyes goes to the hills, from whence comes our help, and the help comes from the Lord who created heaven and earth, right? So it shows that, of course, and basically, because the heaven, it shows from biblically that heaven have angels and hosts and all, and that's very beautiful. So, and it's written in the Bible that it's all created by God, angels and hosts and everything in heaven. God created all that.
Yeah, God created heaven as a place where obviously spiritual beings resided, right? Angels,
Yeah.
bad angels, good angels. The bad angels, of course, we know there was a rebellion.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, that's the reason for heaven. So, you know, the spiritual realm of heaven obviously is not the same as the physical realm. I mean, you know, although the spiritual realm permeates the physical realm. You know, Jesus says God is spirit, worshipers much spirit, worship him like spirit and truth. But anyway, that's not irrelevant to your point. But yes, heaven is a place where spiritual beings,
Yes.
you know, reside and they live. So, you know, I think angels obviously live there, and
Yeah.
you know, whatever it looks, it's a different dimension. You know what I mean? It's like going into a completely different dimension.
Different
I don't know
picture.
what I don't know what it looks like. I don't, how it
Yeah.
works. Like as a split second, we're entered, it's like into a different dimension, like quantum, you know, people like quantum theory, you know, or it's a totally different dimension, things like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, it's a totally different realm.
Yeah, yeah, because whatever we know about heaven, that's of course it's from Bible. Whatever it says that about like angels and hosts and other beautiful things, this and that. So of course we know about heaven that much only that Bible says, of course, yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I'd have to look up, once again, I have to go back to Genesis and look up the way that's translated again. The way it's, you know, the way heaven is used, where the way he's using there, because I know the Hebrew for that. I mean, it refers to like physical sky,
yeah,
you know, and so it's I don't think there's any biblical Hebrew, there's no specific word for a modern concept of universe, but yeah, so I think it may just be like so in Genesis 1:8, it's the same thing, the way
yeah.
Hebrews
That's
use for
what I want
Genesis
to mention
1:1,
as well. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, you know, obviously, I think that's what it's really referring to there, just
Yeah,
physical sky.
God, yes, yeah. Genesis 1:8, and it said that God called the firmament heaven.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a great book by Randy. I'll have to promote another book here. Has anybody ever read Randy Alcorn's book on heaven? That's like the big book that a lot of people read, still out. Let me, I'll post that one here too. Post it in the chat room here. That's over 1 million copies sold. It's okay. It's a decent book. I have it. You know, I don't want to say too much. We can know more than Scripture reveals about heaven, so you don't want to make it say something it's not. You know, because I don't know how much we can know. We can know some things, but not everything. So I definitely know it's a different dimension. So,
Exactly.
and I don't. Obviously, we're going to be in it pretty quickly after we die. It's like I believe it's less than we can even blink, but I don't even know. You know, I mean, I don't know how fast. You know, it's going to be a different time probably. Time's not going to be the same there. So I don't know if we're going to walk around going, is it 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock? I don't think I don't think time's going to be like that there. But I don't know. So, but it's going to be really cool to find out. A lot of people have had those near-death experiences, right? They talk about it. So we talked about that. We did the near-death experience call. So